recording in progress.
We're live
to tape, and then slightly edited for post-production purposes and massaged to put on another edition of Generation Zennial with Keith and Vinnie, your gracious hosts. This is episode number 20. We've made it to the 20th episode. I feel like it's a landmark occasion for podcasting all around the world. Our dozens or dozen fans are cheering in their cars as they commute to and from work.
They're so happy right now.
At least that's when my wife listens to it.
We made it to episode 20.
I always get confused when my wife pulls into the garage and I open up the door to greet her and I hear my voice playing from the car stereo and I go, "Stop listening while I'm here." I hate hearing my own voice.
I know. I can't stand hearing my own voice either.
Yeah, we love talking. It's amazing.
I do. Yes, we do. I do love talking, but I don't like listening to myself. Oh my God, when I made a new YouTube video. Here's a plug. Just another guy talking about stuff YouTube channel. Go check it out.
I just saw that. It came up on my feed.
Yeah, my chicken sandwich video. And my biggest problem is when I have to edit, obviously I have to listen to myself talk, and it's like excruciating. I'm like, oh, why am I doing this? And it's just like, oh, I hate this. And then I put the video out, and people like it.
Well, I've been doing a lot of video tutorials for my classes, and yeah, I hate listening to myself, but it's great because now I don't have to explain the same thing 1,000 times. I can okay, we're going to talk about in class, and now if you forget what I said, here's a 10-minute version of that you can stop, pause, rewind. I think the greatest thing I've figured out is how to pause between things so that way I have edit points. Otherwise, I drive myself nuts in the edit afterwards.
Yeah, I noticed myself doing that. Like if I want to redo a take and I go on too fast, and then I have to find an exact half a second where I've actually paused
exactly
to try to cut that. That can be annoying. So there's a little tip for you out there, you amateur filmmakers out there. If you're shooting your own content, make sure you give yourself a nice pause in between takes to give yourself a nice little edit point.
That's one of my intro class. One of the first things they shoot is we just do a simple 3-angle cut for conversation. So he's like, here, just record a knock joke. That way you don't have to think of the material. Here's the material. Record 2 people telling a knock joke from 3 different angles and then cut it together. And I always say, don't be on top of each other's lines. One person speaks, pause. The other person speaks, pause. In the post, you cut it together and change the rhythm. Otherwise, it's going to be on top of each other constantly. Do you hear that notification in the background?
No, I didn't hear anything.
I have everything shut off, but something, what window is making noise in my ears? It's weird. I'm just going to close all my browser windows because something, I figured out where it was. I have my Slack window open on the side over here.
I don't know what Slack is.
Slack is the messaging app for businesses, except my friends and I use it for our D&D chat.
So it's like Skype.
It's well, no, yeah, I don't know. It's like WhatsApp, but not. It's Slack. But I just heard it. I was like, doo-doo-doo. I was like, why am I getting notifications? Because I also have my computer set to do not disturb, so I don't know why it was popping up in my ear.
Because Slack doesn't care about do not disturb.
Slack is like, we are about business, and you need to know when business is happening. And screw you and your do not disturb.
We are coming for you. We're letting you know that we're here. We're Slack.
So before we even talked about what we were going to talk about today, I knew we were going to have to inevitably talk about yet another sad shooting event in this country, and I was thinking because of our generation being Zennials, I don't know about you, my first recollection of a mass shooting was probably Columbine.
Yeah, I think that was the first big publicized mass shooting
of our generation.
Obviously, it happened in a school. It was all over the news. It was a big deal. Happened on 4/20/1999. It's a date that I don't think a lot of people will forget. Yeah, we were in college. I remember that.
Yep.
I remember seeing the news. So we were right out of high school.
That's our freshman year of college.
Would have been our freshman year.
Yeah, April 1999. That's our freshman year. So I'm pretty sure we definitely had to write papers or 2 docs about it. I distinctly remember, was it the next year or the year after? Because Michael Moore released a film called Bowling for Columbine, and we at the time it was only he like wasn't as big as he is now. It was like, you know, after his series and one other film, this was like one of his first major things, and so it wasn't in the major theaters. We had to go see it in like some art house theater in Stanford. So like, you know, we loaded 2 carloads of students up and we drove down there to watch it.
Yeah, that was his second big movie, wasn't it?
Yeah, Roger and Me was his
Roger
first
Me
one.
was the big one in the 80s.
And then but he also had like a little mini series about.
Yeah,
you know,
he had a TV show.
Yeah, yeah, TV show
in the early 90s. I do remember that.
But Bowling for Columbine, you're right? I think it was his first major, like aside from Roger and Me, it was his first major thing that was out there. And then, of course, after that, Fahrenheit 9/11 was actually released in theaters, which I always love the irony of people, because he gets was it an Oscar? I think he won an Oscar for it.
For Bowling for Columbine, I believe.
No, for Fahrenheit 9/11.
Oh, did he?
So he
Pretty
wins.
sure he won an award for Bowling for Columbine as well.
Well, the Fahrenheit 9/11 one sticks out in my head because he wins the award for the movie, and we all and if you know what it was about, you know, he did a whole wow, it's been so long since I've seen it, but it was a really good documentary about 9/11, and he wins this award. He goes up, he starts giving his speech, and as during his speech, which he continues talking about the topics of the movie, people boo him. The people that just applauded him for winning the award are now booing him on stage for speaking more about the movie.
Right.
Well,
we talked about this last week, and when we talked about like the protest songs and cancel culture, and like how
right.
in the mid
there's cancel culture right there.
Yeah, it was very unpopular to speak out against you know, the war in Iraq and George Bush in certain circles. Obviously, I mean, I think as time went on, you know, George Bush was found a little bit less favorably, but I think people forget how popular like he was and the war in Iraq was in the early to mid 2000s at least.
Right.
You know, everyone was kind of hungry for blood at the time. So yeah, I mean, it was different times compared to, you know, the political scene we have today, where, you know, I think we have two very, very loud sides going at each other. Whereas, you know, back then, George Bush even had, you know, relatively popular support, even though obviously he kind of stole that election to even be there in the first place. But that's a whole nother.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother documentary on it.
But yeah, I think people do forget how popular, like, you know, post 9/11, that whole ideology was.
Well, you know, it's you ride on that wave of, you know, nationalism, because anytime a tragedy happens to the country like that, now we stop looking at each other as enemies and we look outward to another enemy, and it allows people to forget that we don't hate each other. Although but we can't forget during that time there was, just like now, there's a rise in hate crime against IP, Asian American Indo-Pacific. I learned a new term this past week.
There's a rise in hate crimes more.
So there's
across
a new
the board,
but there was a, you know,
there's a rise in white supremacy across the board as well.
But you know, we see the rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans because of the coronavirus, and after 9/11, you saw a rise in hate crimes against people that looked Middle Eastern.
Yeah, necessarily didn't even have to be Muslim, but
right.
If they, you know, if they came across as, you know, someone who would stereotypically look like a Muslim, that then they were
right,
basically ostracized.
Exactly. Even though the people that, you know, committed 9/11 was really a small group.
Yeah, mostly Saudi Arabians, but we couldn't do anything about that because, you know, oil.
Yeah, yes, that's right. Backed by the Saudi government that we were friends with, so
we sell them tons of weapons. We can't do anything about that. So
well, we also sold Afghans.
So let's go to Afghanistan.
But we also gave Afghans tons of weapons to fight the communism in Russia.
In the 80s, yes.
Yes. Well, that's the part that, you know, I find it so weird that people of our generation tend to be a little bit more educated about this than the people that actually grew up in it, because those people, you know, our parents' generation were kind of like with Reagan and all that, were sold the patriotic line and all this stuff.
There was so much anti-communist propaganda that we didn't grow up with and deal with. Like, you know, our parents grew up with this like huge anti-communist sentiment that you still see today. Like, it's still out there. Obviously.
Well, watch the movies from the 80s, you know.
Oh God, like Red Dawn and
Red Dawn, Iron Eagle, things like that.
Yeah, it was,
Sorry,
they're
Iron Eagle is one
all
of my favorite movies of all time for no
you
good
know, they're
reason.
not bad movies, but they are definitely
No, Iron
you
Eagle is
know,
a bad movie.
pro military.
Pro military, pro America, anti anything that's not democracy. Um, but we going back to my point about Afghan, like we forget, people very quickly forget that all those weapons that and all those tactics and all the knowledge that was used against us in things like 9/11 and other wars were things we gave them. We
Oh yeah,
we enabled this to happen. And then if you go back even further, and again, this is when History Channel was great, by the way, back in the late 90s, early
before it
2000s,
was all ghost shows.
when you actually learned about history and like gold mining and stuff like
What
that.
is on the History Channel anymore? I don't even know.
I don't even know. But, they once in a while they have like a good miniseries that's really well done, but other than that, it's all reality TV crap now. But, one of the things I learned also, if you even go back further, like a century and a half back, is when like we first abandoned a Middle Eastern country. Because like we helped if you know the Marine theme song, there's from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Tripoli is in the Middle East, and I forget the whole thing right now, but at one point we had committed to help out, and then change of presidency, things like that. All of a sudden we pull out and we abandon them, and we as Americans, because we are a young country, also have a short memory. Nations that are centuries old, millennia old, have a very long memory.
I tend to remember things like
They don't
being
forget.
abandoned.
They don't forget that we did that. We committed troops to help you out, and then we pulled the troops out. They don't forget that. But we don't teach about that in the history books. We just teach about how great we are, and most Americans have no idea, that we were aiding foreign governments in the 1800s. Like that's not known.
Right. I mean, the history of America is basically a history of like doing things like this stuff, and then like when other countries retaliate or do some actions against us, we just raise our hands, going, "What did we do? Why is this happening?" I mean, you can even say the same thing about 9/11. I mean, it's definitely an unpopular opinion, but we kind of created the monster, like you said, when it comes to what happened. Not only with Osama bin Laden, but like not listening to what the people of a country like want, because we as a superpower always act in our own best interest, not necessarily thinking about what's in the best interest of the people that we're affecting overseas. But yeah, that's. But and that goes back to like this whole theme that I'm thinking of right now, is that just like history keeps happening and nothing seems to change. It always seems to be whatever's in the best interest of the ruling class,
Right.
for the superpowers of any country that's been a superpower. That's a pretty typical, and even going back to the shooting, and what I was going to say about if you watch Bowling for Columbine now, it's a lot of the same talking points that are still being made 20 years later. It's things aren't progressing the way that we think they are sometimes, but things really aren't, especially when it comes to things like guns and our foreign policy. Those two things specifically seem to be something that's been like very stagnant throughout our life, and even before that, it's hard to argue.
Right, and talk about the ruling class and that nothing's changed. Again, it's a cycle of mass shootings. So thoughts and prayers, talk for change, people forget, nothing happens, another mass shooting, and it's like kind of the cyclical thing that always happens, and nothing happens because the people
it's the same arguments that you see online. It's the same arguments you see in the news.
Oh yeah, you can't take my guns. It's our
constitutional right. No, it's a militia. No, it's the founding fathers wanted to make sure that people had arms, and that was what we don't talk about is that was probably because they wanted to keep their slaves. That has a big thing to do with the fact that we want to make sure that the quote unquote public was armed. They didn't want the public armed. They wanted themselves armed so they could squash any slave revolts. Let's be honest. Like that's basically what it was about. Because people don't really think of it in that frame. I mean, like we've talked about this how many times on the show about how people like venerate the founding fathers and how great they were, but honestly, they were just a bunch of slave owners that wanted to hold on to their property and didn't like the fact that Britain might have been like infringing on their right to
taking
their
some of their
quote unquote
profit.
right to their private property, because England had a lot of bills to pay at the time, and they were
Right.
like, well, you're a colony, we need to cash in on you guys. And they're like, whoa, wait a minute. We're doing pretty well for ourselves now,
Mm-hmm.
and the French don't like you, and you really don't have the power to be pushing us around anymore, and you're all the way over there, so leave us alone. And they're like, we can't leave you alone, like we founded you. And they're like, you know what, you're gonna leave us.
But like I said, there's a bunch of rich white
Right, it
guys
was
that own land
it
and
was the ruling
slaves.
class. It's even the founding of this country is based on that kind of ideology, where the ruling class is going to do what's in the best interest of them, not necessarily what's in the best interest of the world.
But they're going to make it look like they're doing the best interests of the
Well,
other
especially
people. That's how they get on. That's how they get
the
this
history
war.
books. They get to write the history books.
To the victor goes the spoils, and the history books. Actually, I'm going to badly paraphrase a meme that I just saw posted 2 days ago by my father, actually. And it was a guy talking to him, and the guy's like, well, the founding fathers intended, and she goes, the founding fathers did not intend for me to vote. In fact, they didn't intend for you to vote because you don't own land. So stop telling me what the founding fathers intended, because I don't give a crap.
Yes.
There was even more to it than that, but it's like that's what.
But that's the attitude
they didn't want women to vote.
But that's not the attitude that we get brought up with in this country. We get brought up in these
founding fathers.
The most wisest men in the history of the world.
It's like they're Moses carrying down the Ten Commandments.
Yes.
It's like, oh well, these are the Ten Commandments from God.
Jesus is enshrined in the Bill of Rights. The greatest political document in history is the Constitution of the United States.
And if you want to talk about what they intended, they also intended for the Constitution to be updated as we progressed.
So right, they did at least know that. I mean, let's be honest.
That's what amendments are for. Hello.
Yeah, the way amendments are put into the Constitution at this point in history is not like near impossible.
Oh yeah, because you have to have what 2/3 of the state ratify or something. I forget what the percentage is, but you have to have a majority of the states ratify in order for it to be made to an amendment. So you're right, it is impossible. And
the political climate of the world, of the country right now makes it near impossible. I mean, we haven't had an amendment in our lifetime.
No, and that's why you're not going to see anything change right now with a 50-50 Senate. You're not going to see any change in gun laws at this point, no matter what. And even if Biden does an executive order, what does that do? That's for 3 years, unless he keeps the presidency or a Democrat keeps the presidency, because executive orders can just get reversed. So I agree. Executive orders is it's a Band-Aid. It's not a solution. It could help in the might help in the short term, but I don't know. I feel like there's nothing big enough that would happen for the gun supporters to change their minds.
No,
because they're so ingrained in their ideology.
We had a terrible tragedy about 9 years ago, 10 years ago now in
Sandy Hook,
Connecticut.
Yeah,
and the states around us did react to that at least, and I know Connecticut passed some laws. That was around the same time New York State passed the SAFE Act, which is you still see yard signs out there to repeal the SAFE Act, whereas I don't think the SAFE Act has statistically proven to make anything worse, but I come back to this. You're just going to see the same arguments that have been going on for the past at least 20 years about how gun control is unconstitutional. You're going to see things. You're going to see the arguments. Well, we need guns to stand up against the federal government, which is a weird excuse, right? It's not. You're like, I don't know what you expect to do. I do believe that in militias. I think we should have strong state militias that are regulated by the state.
Well-regulated militias. If you read the whole thing, it says in support of a well-regulated militia, not some backwoods militia that's a bunch of guys that say, "Hey, we're a militia." That's not a militia. The militia is supposed to be run by the state.
Yeah, and I have no problem with private citizens owning guns either. But I think there needs to be some kind of accountability.
There should be a national gun registry.
Weapons should be a national gun registry. I think. I mean, if people who have,
if I have to register my car, why can't you register your gun? I'm sorry. There's
people
no
with high-power firearms should have insurance attached to these weapons. in case something happens, even an accident happens. Like I think that's a good way to go about things, because
An
then at least
accidental
people seem to be a little
discharge.
more liable.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think there's things we can do to help make this country a safer place. Because let's be honest, this is like the only country where this happens at this frequency and at this level.
But if
Like,
you look at the number of guns, the New York Times yesterday had a chart out that showed number of guns per million people, and then also number of deaths. And it's like you had on the lower left hand were all like these other major countries, and on the top right corner was the U.S. all by itself, far and away from everybody else. And because all these are smaller countries, and again, it's percentage wise, so it's not like, you know, it's a numbers to numbers comparison based on like per million people, and we are just far and away more have a lot more gun problems. And the thing is, we always only talk about it when there's a mass shooting, but the reality is the mass shootings are a very small part of the picture.
Yeah,
most of it is domestic dispute, suicide, accidents. That's when most gun deaths occur.
yeah. Another argument I want to touch on is the argument that people make is like what like you said is like, well, most of this is suicides. And so, how you can't do anything about suicides. And it's like, yeah, but the reason why like there's a high rate of suicide with guns is because it's a very effective method.
Yeah,
Right.
because I put it up and I pull the trigger and it's done. It's not like I took some pills and then there's a chance for recovery. I slit my wrist, there's a chance for recovery, and then I have a come to Jesus moment. It's like it's a one and done situation unless I'm a very bad shot.
Yeah, there's a lot of information out there to talk about this. And like you said, like if a less lethal method is used, like I think most people that do attempt to commit suicide
Don't actually want to kill
regret
themselves.
it right immediately afterwards.
It's a call for help.
And and I do think that because if you do use a firearm, there's very less of a chance that you're going to be able to be recover from that, versus like another method where you might actually like have an enlightened moment and say, oh my God, I don't want to do this. Like, let me reach out for help right now. So that it's like suicide is a big part of like gun safety and gun regulation, and it's something that the public should do something about, and it's something that the public can do something about. It's not this like magical thing where like people are just like, well, if people are going to find ways to kill themselves even if they have guns or not, so why not give them guns? That's a dumb argument. It's just a bad argument. But there's a lot of bad arguments when it comes to guns. There are a lot of good arguments when it comes to guns, because I do think there's a level of safety and protection that can be had if and even fun, like recreational shooting is something that a lot of people enjoy. And I
haven't done it for a long time, but I do enjoy shooting guns.
Yeah,
it's
I have
fun.
no problem with that.
Going to a range and shooting a target it's fun. I don't care what anyone says. It's a good time, but
obviously there has to be something. We have to do something about this, and we keep saying. But this is the same thing that I'm bringing up. Like these are the same arguments that people have been making. Like I said, for the past 20 years. Like I guarantee, if we sat down and watched Bowling for Columbine, it'd be the same exact arguments that people are making for and against gun control.
And if anytime you bring up like even just like, oh, we should have a national registry or whatever, there's like everyone that's against it always says, well, that's just one step closer to the government taking my gun. It's just they know where my guns are now, they can come and take them. It's like, no, you had 8 years of Obama, no one took anybody's guns. In fact, gun sales went through this is the real secret, is they love it when Democrats president because they get more gun sales.
Oh yeah.
Anytime this comes to legislation,
they cry. They're coming for your guns. You're taking your guns. You better buy your guns now because you won't be able to buy guns soon. Biden's going to take all your guns. Obama's going to take your guns.
But if you want to take your guns, if you want an AR-15, maybe that should be a separate course and a separate license, because that is a killing machine. First of all, guns are killing machines. Period. I don't care what you're killing. It's designed to kill. That's what a gun is for.
Right. Well, that's you hear people talk about the argument about, well, we got to do something about cars, and it's like, well, we do a lot about cars to make cars safer for people. Why can't we do that why can't we do the same thing about guns? We make people get insured. We make people to get a license. We make people there's a national. Guess what? Maybe there's not a national registry, but there's a state registry
of all vehicles.
Everyone who has a driver's license.
And you know what?
And if you get caught driving without a driver's license,
you're
penalized. You're penalized for that.
And there's been innovations over the years of like finger sensing devices, or like you have to wear to unlock the gun, or so like when you put your finger on the grip, it senses your fingerprints, and now you can use it. So that way, no one else can use your gun. Or it's a wristband, so you have to wear like the wristband, and so it's like a
It has a
Bluetooth
connection to the.
proximity. Like yeah, it's like basically an NFC device. So that way, if someone else picks it up, they can't use it. So these things exist now, but and there have been attempts to make it in certain states where new guns have to follow these, but there's been so much pushback because, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And like, oh my God. But you think about it, like, oh, what if a officer's in a situation and that fails and now they can't shoot back? I'm like, how many times has that happened? First of all, and if, I don't know. Or maybe like you make an exception for the officers. They don't have to have those guns because they need it to work 100% of the time, and that's a different situation. But for the average citizen, you know, maybe you need to have a secondary device so that way you can use your weapon.
Maybe all cops don't need to carry guns. There's a thought.
That is a thought, you know.
I mean,
Like,
it's a pretty radical thought to I think to a lot of people, but I don't think it's something that's out of the question. I don't think
like,
you need every police officer needs to carry a firearm on them,
right?
like. But that's
Like,
a whole nother. That's
well,
another whole other story.
well, yeah. Well, I can get into that one another day. I don't want. That's a rabbit hole, and I want facts behind me when I start talking about that stuff, because I don't want to misstep. But you know, so it was another tragedy this week, and you know, I don't want to say thoughts and prayers to the family, but my heart does go out to them. I just hate saying thoughts and prayers because it's always I hear it nowadays, and it feels like emptiness. Like it's just an easy thing to say.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't pray, so I don't really say thoughts and prayers, but my thoughts definitely do go out to people who experience tragedy. Like, I'm not a heartless, piece of crap, but
You jerk.
but there's something that we can. This is things we can do about these things. Like I
Yeah.
said, this is the only country where this happens in this kind of frequency, and this kind of severity. So there's definitely some things we can do about it. We just, as a nation, kind of refuse to because of the Constitution, I guess. I mean, honestly, at this point, I'm not even sure why we do it.
Well, speaking of the Constitution and how people are violating rights, Georgia is messed up.
Well, Georgia just had an election where two Democratic senators got elected in a runoff, and Republicans saw that and said, "Well, we need to do something about this voting thing. Too many people are getting. It's too easy to vote. We need
It's
to make
too easy to vote.
We need to make voting a little bit more restrictive to make sure these Democrats don't get elected again." And that's what it is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's
You see
a return
it
to Jim Crow.
right. You see it in the Republican argument is they're literally right now saying that we need less people to vote so Democrats can't get elected.
Right.
That's literally their argument, and whether or not they frame it like that, like if you break it down, that's what it comes down to. It comes down to, and I said this before the last election. I said the more people that have access to voting, the more liberal and the more Democrats are going to get elected to office, and conservatives.
Right. And they know that, and that's why they know that. They know that, and that's why they're trying to put in, in the southern states. There's a big thing about on Sunday voting. It's the souls to polls, where they go right from church to the polls, and they go together and vote in mass.
You're right. They're doing things to limit Sunday voting. They're doing things to limit mobile
hours
voting.
of voting. Closing polls at 5:00. Like, if you have to work during the day and you can't take the day off, well, first of all, that's another. It should be a national holiday on election day.
Which isn't even going to help things because if you think about it, like nowadays, even on national holidays,
people stop to work.
What percentage of this population still has to work on national holidays?
Which is why it should be a multi-day event. It should not be one day.
No,
it should be. Election day should be the last day. You'll give it time for everyone to vote, even if it's just a week. Give it 7 days so you can go through the weekend. Over 7 days you should be able to take at least one day off. I hope, to be able to go and vote.
Right, and but this also goes back to things like mail-in voting. Obviously, in this past election, and it had a lot to do with coronavirus. Obviously, in a lot of states enacted mail-in voting because they didn't want people crowding around at polls, and it was obviously massively successful, because we can just see by the number of people that voted in this past election compared to elections past. It was a very popular program.
I loved it.
We early voted, right? So we took a day and we walked up down to the polls and did it on a Saturday.
We voted by mail.
stood in line for like about an hour, I think.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that's how popular like this early voting was because
Right.
I've never waited that long in a line on election day.
Right.
Um, but obviously, when you have early voting, you're going to have less polls open. It's not
True.
necessarily going to be that one specific location in your neighborhood. It's kind of more for the whole city, so it makes more sense that a lot of people are going to be there. You might have to wait a little bit longer, but then it was done, and I didn't have to worry about election day happening and waking up early before work or before my workout or like
Right.
finding when am I going to go to the polls. Like, um, and you just saw how massively popular like all the early voting and the mail-in voting was just by the numbers. So like that's a good thing. Like I'm a fan of democracy. This is something that I think is good for the people. So it's something that I'm for. I think, but obviously there's conservatives out there that aren't very happy that more people are going to be able to have access to voting, and because it hurts their chances. Let's be honest.
Well, yeah, and they're gonna continue to push the false narrative that early voting or mail-in voting leads to more fraud and all this stuff, which is total nonsense.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, we couldn't find any real instances of voter fraud in this past election, with even with the increased mail-in voting.
I mean, there's always voter fraud, but it's like 0.0000082% or something like that.
Yeah,
Like the instance of voter fraud, and a lot of times the voter fraud isn't even actual fraud; it's just a
a mistake.
mistake. you
Yeah,
know,
I voted in the wrong place. I didn't. Yeah,
even if there was
I thought I was in this ward and wasn't that ward, and
even if there's like 3% of like I forget what the statistically insignificant basically is the term like if you're not within a certain outside a certain range it's statistically insignificant if there was voter fraud because it's not enough to do anything and
right.
it's
As long as it's
nonsense.
not enough to actually change the results of an election.
Right. And it's not, it never
Yeah,
has been.
if it's like a few, yeah, like you said, it's like probably
and
like one
and
one
the
tenth of a percent or something like that.
and the only real voter fraud we've even heard of in the last 5 years has always been from Republicans.
Well, that's another story too. Yeah, I mean,
Collecting the ballots from people and changing what their ballots say before handing them in. Like that's Republicans are doing that, not Democrats.
yeah,
But they're always accusing
that seems to be
Democrats
the
of
case
Republic.
too.
So it's like they're always trying to manipulate the system any way they can, but they're always going to say the other person's doing it. The immigrants taking your job, they're doing the voting, this and that and the other thing. And it's like, you know what? Illegal aliens don't vote people. They can't. They don't. They're not on the list. It's just it's amazing what people believe, the stories that are made up, just to scare them, basically, to get them to fall in line.
Well,
And
fear is a
brain
strong
controller.
motivator.
Fear is
It's a
the mind
very
killer.
strong motivator. And it's a tactic that I think people use politically all the time. And I'll even say it's not something that the both sides do kind of use that.
Yeah.
Because it is a strong motivator. But the conservatives seem to just like straight out lie about things like this.
Well, they
Especially when it comes to immigrants, and especially when it comes to voting, and especially when it
it's
comes to like things like the economy. They
that's their
need to
way.
they need to lie because their arguments really don't hold
Right. There's no
water
real
unless
truth to
they
them, so they have
right
to lie.
they have to exaggerate things or bleed out straight out just lie about things. But
You,
that's the world we live in.
you know what else is a good motivator?
No,
Money.
tell me.
Money.
Oh well, yeah.
Because I just saw beforehand when I was driving here. I was dropping my kid off. I got a headline on my phone. Dominion Votings has just sued Fox News for like $1.2 billion for their fraud for their slander. There it
Yeah,
is. I
we'll
couldn't think of the
see.
right word.
I'll be interested to see where that goes.
Well, remember when they sued One American News and then they stopped talking about voter fraud all of a sudden?
Yeah, and not only stop talking about it, they had to
They,
write. They
they
every
shut up
time
the milk by pillow
every time
guy
they had to have Mike Lindell up, they had to read this like press release
disclaimer.
that that was basically like, no, this is all BS. Like we can't find any fraud so we can't report on it.
Telling you, being
Please don't sue us, Dominion. And
because
please,
they're and to be fair, One American News is a much smaller organization than Fox
oh
is.
God,
Fox is a giant machine. That also owns the New York Post. Oh, guys, do you see the backlash against the New York Post from gun rights activists? By the way,
I did
not
not.
gun rights supporters. I mean, because someone wrote a opinion column in the New York Post supporting gun legislation,
Oh my God, yeah, you don't do that in New York Post.
and like people were on social media like, "Oh, what are you doing?" Like they were just ranting against the New York Post, like all these gun rights people, And
I do follow the New York Post on Twitter.
oh,
I think whoever runs their Twitter account
oh, they tweeted it
is
too.
like an evil genius. Like very good at clickbaity, like knows exactly how to manipulate the audience. He like I say he, I don't know if it's a male or female.
They,
They they are very good at picking out stories to put on Twitter and putting the headline out there, and just like it's just like throwing chum in the water. Like you can see it, like you recognize it, and you're like, oh my god, the comments on this post are going to be awful, just because I and people that it gets a lot of comments, right? Because that's the idea. They're literally
oh,
just
they're
throwing.
clickbaiting. Yep.
Oh, they're just throwing this,
And then
like
they're just reading the
this
headline. They're not even reading the
vile like
article.
chum. Oh my god, like oh god, the stories about God, I can't remember his last name right now. Elliot Page.
Yes.
Oh my god, every time there's a story about Elliot Page, it knows exactly how to put it out there, to frame it to like just be like so anti-trans and so like virile that these people, like both sides, almost can't help but like pick up and just like you know get voice their opinion on the subject, because they know it's such a like it shouldn't be a controversial topic, but it is.
No,
But it is
it shouldn't be.
especially to conservatives.
And I
But
love when
then you
people
also
get.
have people defending Elliot Page, and it just creates just this firestorm of awfulness on like the worst parts of Twitter. You know what I mean?
I just love when people get outraged about something that doesn't affect their life at all.
That's the internet, isn't
You
it?
know,
That's
I
like
know it is.
that's
It is the internet. You're right.
that is social media in a nutshell. Just like
I'm upset about a thing that doesn't have anything to do with me personally,
yeah,
or my family, or anybody I know, but I'm gonna
but
be upset about it.
because it's the downfall of American society in these people's minds.
Yeah, haven't you seen us fall apart already? Like they're killing America.
I hate to break it to people. Like society changes. Like it happens.
You wait until next week when the gas prices go over $3 and they blame Biden for it. Even though
They've already blamed. No, they're already blaming Biden.
but it's
They're
gonna
already
go.
blaming Biden
But
for
it's gonna go
the
over.
gas prices.
It's gonna go up even higher because of the tanker that's stuck in the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
But they're gonna blame Biden, even if he has nothing to do with it.
They already blamed him. They already started blaming him because gas prices went up like before he got elected.
20
Gas
cents.
prices started going up, and then they just guess what? They tend to go up after the number one. They tend to always go up in the spring. Number two,
Right.
people are returning to work, right? People are starting to travel again.
Two. Yep.
So gas prices are going to
Supply and demand.
It's simple like economics, but I don't know why it's so hard
and number
to
three,
understand.
there was a devastating winter storm in Texas that shut down refineries for like a week.
Oh yeah, remember that whole big thing?
So everyone needs to go back to like high school economics class and learn about supply and demand again, and how that works, because demand goes up, if supply doesn't adjust, prices go up. Oh, it's so weird how that happens.
No, it's because Biden got elected and he's anti-oil, and obviously
The socialist government is going to cause gas prices to go through the roof.
Anarcho-Bidenism is going to just make gas prices skyrocket, and pretty soon it's going to be up $7-8.
And it's going to turn the frogs gay.
That's what Trump said. Trump in his speech at CPAC was like, pretty soon you'll be paying $7-8 a gallon for gas.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's just going to go up to $7-8.
But how many times have we heard that? How many times have we heard that in the past 15 years? Since Obama became president?
The most we ever had was Hurricane Katrina.
Our oil policies are going to cost $7 a gallon gas, $8 a gallon gas. And guess what? I think the most it's gotten was when like Bush was president, and it was like what, $4.
Yeah, and that was because of Hurricane Katrina. Really? Our gas prices went through the roof after Hurricane Katrina because of all the refineries that got knocked off the line. It's Mother Nature's a bitch.
Pretty simple, yeah, but let's not do anything about that either. So.
It's called climate change. Climate change is real, people, and climate change is going to cause more tragedy, more death, more destruction than anything else that we are doing man-made if we don't do something about it.
We're not doing anything about it.
I mean, we're trying. Some people are trying anyways.
Nobody cares. Some people are trying.
I buy my plant-based garbage bags. I try to do what I can,
No, we've talked about this, and I don't want to disparage anybody, and I don't want to be like Debbie Downer about this thing about how
small things don't. You need a big thing.
They need, the people in charge of the wealth in this world need to do something about it before like the little people do, because they're the ones who are causing the most harm to the environment. And yeah, like I said, I don't want to disparage anybody from, like, doing the right thing and trying to do your part, because it's important. But at the
Because
same time, it's really not gonna help anything. And I
not
really,
unless everyone does it.
even if
No.
everyone did, let's be honest, even if everybody in this country right now were like, well, we're gonna um recycle more and buy plant-based garbage bags, and even, I mean, maybe if the entire country went to like electric cars, that would have a big impact.
Well, that's what
At least it's just,
we really need
but
to
still,
electrify the grid more. That's
yeah.
going to be, I like to think
But even that right now, like
even
how much
local
how
governments
much
could
how
make a
much
big
of our electricity is like made by fossil fuels and whatnot.
a lot. I
And
mean,
so even
it's reducing.
even things like that isn't gonna change the world dramatically yet. But like I said, I hope we get there. Because I think by the time we're in our like 70s and 80s, we're gonna look
Uh,
back and be like, we screwed this planet, and there's no coming back from it.
well, by
So
then I hope to have beachfront property because that's where the
I
ocean will be
yeah, the ocean will be in
in my
wherever.
backyard.
Yeah.
I'll be like, okay, kids, go
And
swimming. Just mind the house that's buried underneath the water over there.
yeah, and yeah, don't hit the chimney of the house, and
Yeah.
make sure you check for radiation after after you get out of the water, because
Oh, I don't want. I don't want.
we just brought, yeah. See, that's what I said. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, and like I don't want to like
I always
bring
think
everyone
like
down, but it's things need to change at a large scale level. That isn't going to happen, and it isn't going to happen fast, because I mean the global economy isn't going to allow it. The way we do things right now is like, because we have such global competition.
hmm
China's not anytime soon going to stop polluting, because they care about the environment. They're going to do it because they're making money off of it. And other countries are going to see that and be like, well, if they're not going to do it, why should we do it? They're one of the biggest. They're the biggest country in the world, right? They're huge, and they're probably one of the worst polluters of the world.
Oh,
So if
definitely.
they're not going to do anything about it, why should we do something about it? And then just compound the problem. And like I said, I hope there is a comeback from this. I'm starting to be pretty doubtful about that. And like I said, and by the time we're in our 70s and 80s, hopefully we can make it that far. Like I'm really concerned about what the world's going to look like, as far as climate goes. Anyway,
Well, yeah,
everything else is kind of up in the air as well. But
everything's up in the air.
I mean, yeah, yeah. There's, we can't ignore the rise in like fascism across the world too. I think it got put under a microscope when Trump was president. But now that he's gone, I'm worried that people are gonna just kind of forget about like the problems that got us to Trump, and we're gonna end up with an even smarter and
We're gonna end with a
worse
smarter Trump.
worse Trump, like worse Trump ideology, but even
But
like politically smarter, to the fact where he can actually accomplish things he
but
wants.
but
He
talks
can.
like
He needs to
Reagan.
accomplish. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I still say Reagan was the worst thing to happen in this country in the history of the United States
because
of
you take a
America.
smooth talking politician, gets you to believe the things. Oh, triple down economy, blah 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 blah, all this stuff.
And
War
it
on
still it
drugs.
still permeates to this day. It really does.
Oh, people
It's
still believe in a
still,
trickle down economy. People
and
still believe in the war on drugs that doesn't do anything.
right.
It actually makes things worse.
Because a lot of that, like we said, that propaganda machine was huge in the
So
80s, and
good.
that was when we were growing up, and when people slightly younger than us or older than us were very impressionable, and you kind of see it in our politics of today. It's not good. It's not great. Like I said, Reagan. Like people say Trump is the worst president of all time. I still say it's Reagan, because Reagan was much more successful in his messaging. I think Trump did a better job of dividing us as a people. He made it better. He made it a lot easier to make that gap, especially between pushing the conservatives to the right, and at the same time, I think liberals have been pushed to the left a little bit, thanks to popular candidates like Bernie Sanders, obviously, and AOC. Like the DemSoc idea is getting a little more push. But even now that the election's over and Biden won, you don't really see them as they're not as prominent as I think they used to be when they had like Trump to oppose them, because now Biden's president, so it's a little bit harder for them to push back, um, on liberals than it would be to push back against like an obvious fascist. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Reagan, like you said, Reagan it was great at messaging, and during that time he had everybody behind him. Like
it was very
both
it was
super
very very
popular,
popular. Like you look at the way he won his elections. They like he didn't. It wasn't like Trump where he
landslide.
lost the popular vote by 3 million and still
No, he
won.
won everything.
He won everything.
Carter was unpopular at the
Won
end
like
of his
48 states in his reelection
yeah,
campaign,
so
didn't he?
yeah, it was insane. But you think about it, you went from the greatest generation fighting World War II that then becomes this start of the middle class, raises the new generation of boomers that follow this very, very political, patriotic mindset, and then they have this president in the 80s that and the boomers are in their youth, they're starting their families, and they have this president that's talking how great the country is, and they believe all of that, and they believe everything he says, and they follow him, and then 30 years later we look back and go, what did we do? Why did
Well,
we
that
do
I
this?
mean, and that's the conservative like messaging is that they're very good at pinpointing a certain demographic and engaging with them, knowing that that's how they're going to win political favor,
Mm-hmm.
and just literally ignoring everybody else, and not even ignoring, like causing harm to other groups, in the hopes that that harm will support their base.
Right.
I mean, you saw it with the war on drugs and how they attacked the African American community. You saw it with how they ignored the AIDS pandemic and the queer and LGBT community. Um, yeah, I mean that Reagan was just an awful president, and he'll never get held accountable for that because of how popular he was in that time. So
Maybe when the history books get written 100 years from now, we'll get his dude just
depends who's
desserts.
going to write those history
Well,
books.
that's the other part of it.
This is
Speaking.
if the capitalists are still writing the history books, then Reagan's he's the capitalist hero. Let's be honest.
Well, speaking of rewriting history, how do you feel about rewriting movies? You like my transition?
Yeah. I think we're going to talk about
The Snyder Cut.
The Justice League, the new Snyder, Zack
Now,
Snyder's Justice League.
I will be honest. I have not watched either version because after the original Man of Steel and Superman killed the villain at the end of the movie, I was like, you messed up because Superman doesn't kill people. And I have not been interested in watching another DC movie since
Zack
then.
Snyder's Superman kills people. He
I'm
kills General
not-
Zod, and he killed. Listen, he killed him in the Donner cut and no, not the Donner cut, the Richard Spencer cut of Superman 2. He
Right.
he knocked him down the well, or the Fortress of Solitude.
But it
And I
wasn't
don't
the
think they were
first
ever seen
movie.
again.
Like we saw the first. Yeah, but we never see. He could be alive still. We don't know.
I think that was in the Donner cut. I think they are actually like apprehended by police at the end of the movie, which is kind of weird. Like I don't know what kind of cell you put Superman in. But anyway, yeah. I will say this about the Snyder cut: if you have 4 hours to tell a story, you can tell a more coherent and detailed story. If you tack on 2 hours, it should have been 2 movies. I think that was the original plan, and I think this movie, the new cut, kind of gives credence to that idea of making it 2 movies, because what happened with the original one is they just tried to cram way too much into a 2-hour film. And a lot of things just kind of got blown by. The plot started to weaken a little bit because you didn't really have any backstory. The villain itself had you knew that they hadn't, basically the villain had no chance. Like they didn't build up the villain at all to make him seem powerful. And then the Snyder Cut did a good job of that. I'll get into, I don't think I can really get into spoiler territory in a movie that's came out in 2017, and
No, there's no
the
spoilers.
Snyder Cut doesn't really change any huge plot points. Just basically like adds a lot to it.
and embellishes and
Yeah, well, it made
gives more
it,
meat to
it,
it.
it added a couple scenes where Steppenwolf, who was the villain, um, you know, looks a little bit more powerful. It made the need for Superman a little bit greater. Because basically, I think in the original in the Joss Whedon version, it felt like, all right, Steppenwolf's here. He attacked the was the Amazons to get the mother box. I think they didn't. I don't think they showed him taking it from Atlantis. Um, and it was just kind of like real quick, like here's Steppenwolf. He's the bad guy. He does some things. Don't Nobody really knows what his strengths are or his weaknesses,
Now
and
go fight him.
yeah, and it was like, okay, well, or oh, we can't beat this guy. He's too powerful. We need Superman. Let's go, Superman. Bringing back Superman is not a good idea. Are you sure about that? No, it's a good idea. Let's do it. And everything just moves so fast. Where this, it kind of builds up a little bit more tension between the group about like whether or not we should resurrect Superman. How are we going to resurrect Superman? That plan got drawn out a little bit more too. There was a little bit more tension involved with that story. So, but like I said, you take 4 hours to tell a story, you're going to be able to tell a more coherent story than you can in 2 hours. It's the way time works. It's not a secret.
I mean, I'll be honest. I don't mind a 4-hour movie if it's worth it. I'm always a fan of, because students, they're doing projects for me like, oh, how long does it have to be? I said it has to be as long as it needs to be. If it needs to be 4 hours, it needs to be 4 hours. Like each Lord of the Rings was 4 hours, and there's 3 of them, and I watch all of them.
Yeah,
because they're good. If the quality's good, who cares how long it is?
The studio,
personally.
The
obviously
studio
the studio
cares.
But that's where
if you have a 4-hour movie, you can only show that movie.
Yeah, you show it
times versus a 2-hour movie. You can show that movie double the amount of times, which means.
Let's be real here. They make more money not in the movie theaters anymore. They make more money on the releases of the discs and overseas. That's where they actually make more money. They do make a certain box office in the U.S., but most theatrical releases make more money in theaters overseas and in the DVD and TV rights later on.
But you could also get more viewings and your box office is something that you can kind of brag about in your marketing.
You can.
So that's another big part of it as well. But yeah, that's basically I think a lot of because there's tons of stories out there about studios cutting down movies so they can get more viewings in the theaters. Because
right.
Yeah, even if they can make more money in other markets, they still care about making money, and so the more viewings for them I think is what they're looking at is making being more beneficial.
This is the problem with producers.
Well, it's
studios.
The problem with
capitalism
really. Yeah, I mean, I can always
you get in the way of telling a good story by constricting how long it is.
Exactly.
I mean, and this is where the Marvel is kicking butt over DC is because the Russos had freedom to do what they wanted to do. And they can release it through.
I think to an extent. I think Marvel has. I think Marvel does have a history of hiring directors that they know they can control. I think that's why the Russo brothers got a chance is because they weren't very very well known. They're excellent directors. I mean, obviously, they had a big hand in Community, so I have to give them applause for that because that's my favorite show of all time and the best television show of all time, obviously. But I think I think Marvel did pick their directors based on how well they could control them. I think that's why Edgar Wright kind of got bumped off Ant-Man. He had his ideas and Marvel was like, we have our ideas, so our ideas are going to win out because we own the properties. But I mean, you talk about capitalism in storytelling. I think this is another reason why we see the movies that are coming out now is because anything that's going to come out in the mainstream seems to be that it needs to be already tested and proven that to make money before it even gets a chance.
I actually just heard a great story about this, about the rise and fall of cinema recently, because you go back to like the 80s when you had, or the early 80s, late 70s when you had like single house theaters. They could only show one movie in there, and then when they start chopping those up and like show two screens in smaller theaters. So you have these like bowling alley style theaters, and then when you get the megaplex, AMC was the one that first made the megaplex. Now you have 20 screens. Now you need more content to fill the screens. So you find in the late 80s, early 90s, and also they also invented the stadium seating, because before that was just a auditorium. Now you have stadium seating so everyone can see the screen without obstruction. But when you get to 20 screens and they're all good screens, they're all, some bigger, some smaller, but whatever, you have a need for more films all of a sudden. So that's when you get people taking a chance at making Pulp Fiction and making some other movies that would not have been made had there not been a need for filling screens. And then, of course, after that, they go, you know what? Instead of making a bunch of movies, we just show the same movie on 5 screens. And that's what you get now.
The most popular movies.
Yeah, you get the new releases showing on this half of the theater, and everything else that was already out showing on the other half.
Right, but then you also, like you said, you get studios like not taking chances on
right.
maybe more controversial topics.
So they were for a while. There was like a what was it? I think they said 1999 was the best year in cinema history because you had the most like movies released that year, and they're like most top quality movies. Like The Matrix was that year. Oh, there's a whole list. I can't think of the list now. It's a long list.
I think
Fight Club. Yeah, Fight Club.
American Beauty, I think, might have been around that time.
American Pie.
American Pie.
But it's like a long list of like blockbuster movies were all released in 1999.
I believe it.
That
Thing
was like the pinnacle.
I mean, but that's media. I think another thing that that overlooks too is like the proliferation of VHS tapes. I think when VHS tapes became widely popular in the mid 80s, you saw a huge need for the home video market. And I think that's when you saw a lot of like these like directed VHS movies come out. That's that was the big heyday of the horror genre, because horror movies are obviously a little bit cheaper to make. People don't really you don't really need a extensive plot to make a good horror movie. You just kind of need the good special effects. And back then,
you don't even need good special effects. Let's be honest.
We're relatively cheap. No, I mean not great special effects, but that old school. I do miss though that old school
practical stuff.
Practical gore and horror like that. It's something you don't get anymore. I don't know why people don't try it more. I think it would be wildly popular.
I love practical effects.
Everyone, I think most people who like film, especially horror movies, like dig practical effects way more than they dig CGI. It's more realistic looking, even when it's not realistic looking. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's my story.
You're sticking to it.
Sticking to it.
Well, it was a good story, and I wrote down here Winter Soldier to talk about too, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
you watched it.
I watched the first episode. I haven't watched the second episode yet. I think it comes out on Thursdays, which was yesterday. It was decent. Like I was telling you before we went on the air. I feel connected to the universe, and I feel like it's one of those things where like if I miss a story or a bit of the story, like I'm gonna miss things in the future, which probably isn't even true. But I mean, I'll give Disney credit for marketing like that to me anyway. I feel like I'm going to miss out on even characters that I really don't even care that much for.
Right.
These two characters were kind of side characters in the movies.
They definitely were ancillary characters. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't really have much of a story to them, but now they're getting their own TV show to kind of build on that. So it's like, yeah, I kind of want to know more, so I'm going to be invested in this. Whether or not it's good or not is going to be whether or not I keep watching it. But so far it's been decent enough to take up 45 minutes of my day and check it out.
Like I said, like I was saying in the pre-tape, my only thing from a marketing standpoint for Disney, like I feel as though you just had a very successful run with WandaVision, like super successful. Everyone raved about it, and everyone's gonna compare this to WandaVision because like, oh, it's another Marvel property. And you're releasing it so close to WandaVision, it's just easy to compare it. Versus if they waited a month or two, it was 2 weeks later they're releasing a new show. Give it a month, give it 2 months, just for some breathing room.
I think they have a lot in
the tank.
Yeah, so it's like you got to get these things out, strike while the iron's hot, and And yeah, I think people can try and compare it to WandaVision, but it's a totally different
I agree.
show. It's a totally different, like the theme is different.
Well, because the Captain America
The
world
ideas are
versus
different.
everybody else is different.
Yeah, I mean, like WandaVision was like groundbreaking for Marvel in the sense that it didn't follow the typical Marvel like superhero line of storytelling, right? It wasn't like super action packed.
Right.
Not that Falcon and the Soldier was like super action packed, but there were,
Not yet.
action scenes in the first, starting off with an action scene, to draw you in, that kind of idea, where WandaVision didn't really have that. It started off with really strong character.
Yeah, and also they used nostalgia and stuff like that as well.
Right, in the old TV format, which I think
always
got a lot of people hooked.
always get me with nostalgia.
Oh yeah, I think they know that, and they know,
and they're doing
it. They're not stupid. They know that how big the nostalgia factor is for people, and they know that they can market it that way and get people watching. But it was really well done too. I just don't want to like mark it up just as propaganda. I thought it was really well done.
Well, right now I'm looking forward to the Obi-Wan series. So
yeah, that could be good.
Hello there.
I think Star Wars has been very hit or miss the past
I
couple
think
years. I do think the new trilogy got a bad rap because I think people our age think it was made for them, and it's not. It's made for like the new generation of Star Wars fans, and it seemed to be very popular with that new generation of Star Wars fans. So who am I to complain about it?
Hey, if there's allowed to be a Snyder cut of Justice League, can we get a recut of the new series?
Yeah, we'll make it just one long like 7-hour Star Wars saga.
Can we just like redo the last 3 movies? Because there were such good parts of it, but there were also parts of it I was just like, that just doesn't fit in right with everything else that we know about Star Wars.
Yeah, and I think that was, like I said, I think that was the problem. People our age thought it was made for us, and it really wasn't. I think it was made for 15-year-olds.
They gave it to the wrong person to do.
That probably has a lot to do with it.
But let's not get into Star Wars. No, we're not getting into it right now. That's too long.
We're running late. We'll start talking. Maybe we should have started with Star Wars. We just talked about that for an entire
We could do
hour.
that. We'll do that next time maybe for our 21st episode. Unless something, I hope. I'm gonna say
maybe we have a boring week.
Yeah, let's have a boring news week. Let's have nothing crazy happen over the next week, and that'd be a great week in America and the world.
Well, that was the dark joke this week. It was like America had 2 mass shootings. We're back to normal, people.
Yeah, great.
So that's a pretty dark joke to make.
I don't like being back to normal.
Yeah. Maybe we should go back into another lockdown. It's good for people's lives. Gotta save lives, because lock it down.
I'm still waiting to be able to sign up for my shot.
I'm technically fully vaccinated as of last Sunday. So
congratulations!
It was 2 weeks after my Johnson & Johnson shot. I'm a fully vaccinated person.
I still have 9 more days before I can even sign up for my shot. So, not that I'm counting, but I'm counting.
It's the perks of being a healthcare professional, I guess.
Well, hopefully, if you're out there and you're eligible for getting your vaccine, go get it.
Go get your.
Don't
vaccine.
wait. Just
Sign
do it.
up.
It's
check
safe.
the website multiple times a day. Get your vaccine as soon as possible.
In Connecticut, there's a lot of openings in a lot of spots right now. They've been having openings throughout the days, so there's definitely places to get it. So go get your vaccine. Keep don't do anything stupid this week.
That's our public service announcement. Don't do anything stupid and get vaccinated.
And get vaccinated and have fun. Hey, just have fun. Have a good life.
Enjoy life as much as you can. You only get one. As far as we know, anyway.
Yes, as far as we know, there's only one life, so enjoy it, live it to the fullest. I feel like we should have a motivational speech at the end of our show now, because we talked about some dark things.
It's about as most motivational as I get.
I want to bring it back. Remember, the Force is with you.
Always.
What was it? The line before one of the Clone Wars episodes I watched yesterday was, "When you rescue others, you rescue yourself."
Oh, that's deep.
Yeah, right. So with that, have a great week.
See you.